Boy X, page 242, 1 hour and 10 minutes until shutdown. Ash unlatched the broken window and shoved it open. His stomach cramped when he leaned out and turned around to look up, but he told himself he was strong. He could do this. It was Pierce who had made him afraid, but now Pierce was gone. About 2 feet over his head, a large metal plate was bolted to the wall, with a thick steel cable protruding from it. Ash reached up and tugged it to test its weight. "You're crazy," Isabel said. "You can't use that. It'll be like a giant zip line." Ash turned and scanned along the cable, seeing where it stretched over the balcony, past the cliff with the rickety steps, and out across the bay. It continued at an angle, running all the way down to the concrete building on the beach. "I'm not heavy, so it should hold me." "Like the river crossing?" "No, it's too dangerous. Stay here and what?" he asked. "Kane might be moving slowly, but she'll be here any minute, and as soon as she gets here, she's going to kill us and take this bag." He patted the messenger bag he was carrying across his chest. "Then she's going to leave in that boat. There's no choice here. No choice. I mean, if you can think of another way," Ash said, "please tell me now. Anything." Isabel took a deep breath and shook her head. "Excuse me. I don't have anything." Ash blinked hard. He felt as if he was floating somewhere above his body, looking down on a crazy boy about to do a crazy thing. "Once I've called for help, I'll use the last of the Hex 13 to damage the boat." "You remember the channel number and message?" Isabel asked. 72, Ash heard himself say. "Tighten down." "Right." With his heart stuttering, Ash took a bandage from the survival pack and split it in half, winding the pieces around his small hands for protection. He touched the dog tag and muttered the McCarthy mantra, then unraveled the wire he had brought from outside. He wrapped it tight around one hand and leaned out the window to throw the loose end over the steel cord that ran down to the beach. After wrapping it tight around his other hand, he lifted his feet off the floor to test the strength of the cable. "Don't forget," his voice trembled. "Try to break the cable once I'm down. They mustn't follow me. And when you've done that, get the heck out of here. Find somewhere to hide until help comes." Ash stepped onto the window ledge and sat down, looking out over the endless drop beyond. The breeze whisked about him, chilling the sweat that had broken out all over his body. He couldn't feel his legs anymore. All he could feel was the hammering beat of his heart. He tugged once more on the wire to check it would take his weight. Then he tried to shuffle farther forward on the window ledge, but his body still didn't want to work. "Buena suerte," Isabel said. "Good luck, and thank you," she paused, "for doing this." "De nada," Ash mumbled, and tried to make himself drop, but couldn't. His muscles were frozen in fear. "Isabel? See? I need you to push me." "Are you sure?" "Push me!" He shouted the words, forcing strength into himself, making himself angry and determined and unafraid. "Push me!" He felt Isabel's hands on his back. "Buena suerte," she said again, and gave him a good hard shove. There was a moment of weightlessness, then a sudden jolt as the wire became taut. It dug into his palms, tightened in the places where it was wrapped around the back of his hands, and cut off the blood supply to his fingers. But Ash didn't notice any of that. All he could think about was falling, and dying. 1 hour and 5 minutes until shutdown. The wind lifted his shirt and snatched at his hair as he zipped over the endless calm. The fear of it grabbed Ash like the devil had thrust a hand through his chest to take hold of his heart and squeeze. No breath would enter him. No sound would escape him. All he could do was force every last drop of strength into his fingers and grip the wire like his fists were made from the hardest granite. He couldn't let go. Whatever happened, he could not let go. His eyes watered as he stared at the drop below his dangling feet. The black cliffs sped away behind him, and then he was hurtling more than 300 feet over the rocky beach, with only the strength of his hands to keep him alive. Tears streamed away from the corner of his eyes. "I am strong. I can do this." He repeated the words over and over in his head as he gathered speed. The cable hummed above him, the wire whizzing along it, rasping like a giant zip unfastening. The wind howled in his ears and pummeled him as he started to swing from side to side. Despite his strength, his hands were burning. The pain was excruciating, and when something jarred him hard, the wire tugged tighter, biting into his hands. It threatened to cut through the bandages and slice his skin like cheese wire. Ash opened his mouth and howled as another bump made the wire dig deeper, slipping farther. It was uncoiling from around his fist like a snake, trying to slice through his skin as it went. He looked up at the wire to see what was jolting him, but the speed and the height made his head reel, and he had to fight to stop himself from being overcome by dizziness. He was moving so quickly it was impossible to fix on anything above him, so he looked ahead, seeing the kinks in the cable. And then he hit a pair of them, 2 in close succession, making the wire rip farther from his fists. Ash yelled out in pain and fear. Too many more, and he would lose his grip. Too many more, and he would fall to his death. But he was moving like a bullet, already past the cliffs and out over the water, rocketing toward the concrete bunker that was sunk into the gleaming black sand. If he hit the roof at this speed, he probably wouldn't survive anyway. The impact of hitting the concrete would be immediate and deadly. Ash had to release before he reached it. He had to let go while he was still over the sea. And then the world dropped into delicious slow motion as his heightened reactions kicked in. The air no longer screamed in his ears, but hummed a low and tuneful melody. The wind caressed his face, and he felt the trickle-like motion of the wire slipping through his fist. Below him, the shimmering sea moved in a dreamy slowness, while above him the wire zipped along the cable without haste. He could see and prepare for every approaching crimp, and he could look below to focus on choosing the best and safest place to drop. There, just a little farther. The cable purred and the wire rippled. "Now!" he shouted, and the word was as loud as he could, the sound tearing from his throat, but his hands refused to let go. The world resumed its normal pace with a rush and a pop, and once again Ash was hurtling to his death, his fists locked tight as if they were fused to the wire. "Let go!" Still they clung to the wire. "Let go now!" He let out a long, loud yell and focused everything into his hands, forcing his fingers to open so that the wire skidded through them, slick with blood and sweat. Then he was falling, momentum carrying him forward as he dropped. "Yes!" he shouted as his narrow frame crashed into the waves and cut him deep into the sea. The salt water bubbled and foamed around him, catching him in its tow. But as soon as his feet touched down, Ash pushed hard and shot to the surface. He broke through the waves and gasped for breath, treading water as he wiped his eyes and looked back at the tower. Isabel was there, standing in the window, so he raised a hand to her and she waved back. As he watched, though, a shadow appeared behind her. Isabel's hand dropped and she whipped around, but she was too late. Arms came out of the shadows and grabbed her, pulling her into the darkness of the room. In an instant, Isabel was gone, and Ash watched in horror as Kane's face came into the dark rectangle and looked down at the sea. Acting on instinct, he took a breath and ducked beneath the waves, turning and swimming as fast as he could. His mind was filled with the awful things that Kane could do to Isabel. Terrible things flashing through his thoughts as he swam to the small jetty he had seen from above. and when he reached it, he stopped beside one of the wooden struts until his breath ran out, then rose slowly to the surface and looked back. The window was just a dark rectangle once more, and the cliff top was clear.